Hey guys, tonight we're going to fall face first into one of Olympus's most awkward and weirdly relatable meltdowns. You'll float above golden clouds, surrounded by gods who can't stop bickering over who brought what dish. You'll watch celestial chairs get thrown, divine fruit used as projectiles, and one goddess decide that enough is enough. And yes, tonight, we find out why everyone in ancient Greece had to start swearing oaths of politeness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the banquet a little late. Typical. Olympus, radiant as ever, glows with a blinding shimmer that no mortal eye could really tolerate. But you squint through the glamour anyway. The air is thick with perfume made from fermented starlight and lotus pollen. Music wafts through the air, courtesy of a harp that plays itself whenever someone sighs near it. All around you, the gods are lounging on cloud-pillowed seats, nibbling olives the size of apples and sipping something definitely not FDA approved. You're here for a party, a big one. Zeus just won some war you don't quite remember the details of. Historians still argue whether it was against titans, giants, or just his own boredom. Whatever the reason, there's a feast, and everyone's invited. Well, almost everyone. You spot Hera across the garden, dressed like she's just stepped off a perfume commercial for divine vengeance. Her hair's done, her earrings are tiny gold doves glaring at each other, and she's doing that tight-lipped smile means she's already annoyed. She sees you, waves, then gestures urgently, "Come stand near me. This is about to get weird." And oh, it does, because just as the sun sets behind Mount Helicon, turning everything gold and soft and drowsy, she shows up. Eris, goddess of discord. Not technically banned from Olympus, but definitely discouraged from participating in high-profile social functions. She doesn't walk in. She just appears like a sneeze or a sarcastic comment, wearing black, smirking, and holding a single apple made of solid gold with the words, "For the fairest," engraved in a font that screams, "Let the chaos begin." No one says a word. Even Apollo's lyre goes quiet. You can hear the ambrosia fizz, and then she drops the apple on the banquet table. No speech, no threat, just plunk, right between Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, like a cosmic version of that friend who tags everyone in a messy comment thread and then mutes notifications. What follows is not majestic. There are raised voices, pointed glances, passive-aggressive plate passing. Athena snorts. Hera glares. Aphrodite looks vaguely delighted. You try to fade into the tapestry behind you. Zeus, being Zeus, pretends he has a very important storm to check on and just evaporates into the sky. And then the real mess starts. First, someone throws a fig. No one knows who, possibly Artemis, maybe Hestia, definitely not Demeter. She's still mad. No one ate her grain pudding. Within minutes, the entire feast descends into a glorified kindergarten food fight, but with divine fire. Gale force glares, and suspiciously well-lamed cheese wheels. You dodge a flying bunch of pomegranate seeds and try not to step on Hermes' sandals. He's crawling under the table, looking for his dignity. You wonder why no one is doing anything. And then you realize this. This has happened before. In fact, it happens all the time. There's a reason ancient Greeks built temples, offered wine, and whispered sweet nothings to statues, because the gods were just that dramatic. Politeness, optional. Etiquette, invented later, probably after someone got turned into a shrub for chewing too loud. But tonight marks the tipping point, because Hera, queen of Olympus, deity of marriage, avenger of side chicks everywhere, is done. You can feel her resolve hardening as she wipes divine guacamole off her robe. She stands, raises her goblet, and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "I swear, I am going to fix this with paperwork." You don't know it yet, but history just changed. And yes, later civilizations will spend centuries making up myths to explain it, but you were there. You saw the first spark in Hera's eye, the spark that said, maybe it's time the gods learned how to behave, and maybe, just maybe, mortals should follow. By the next morning, you're already regretting staying the night in Olympus. The clouds aren't as soft as they look, and your pillow had suspicious opinions. Worse, there's a line of gods outside Hera's chamber, whispering, gossiping, and passing around fig-flavored scrolls. You elbow past Apollo, who's humming something spiteful under his breath, and sneak a peek at the latest headline floating on a shimmering pigeon feather tablet. Hera, humiliated at nectar night. Golden apple sparks table trauma. You sigh. Olympus is basically a high school but with lightning bolts and ego issues. Hera, unsurprisingly, is not amused. She's been up since dawn, pacing in a robe made of storm clouds, scribbling angry ideas into her marble notebook. Every so often, she mutters things like, passive aggression is still aggression. And if Dionysus makes one more joke about fruit salad diplomacy, I will scream. Hermes, being Hermes, made things worse. He sent messenger pigeons to every corner of the heavens, recapping the entire fiasco with a little too much dramatic flair. Apparently, the pigeons even reenacted the fig-throwing incident using performance flight. Everyone's talking about it. Hera says through gritted teeth, everyone. Even that minor wind god with the squeaky voice. You know what this means? Right. You nod. Group therapy. She glares. No, this means reputational crisis. Which, of course, is God speak for, we can't let mortals know we eat like toddlers on a sugar binge. And so begins the quiet fallout. You watch as Hera organizes image stabilization meetings with Artemis and Hestia, the only two who actually stayed polite. She sends out tiny lightning-shaped invitations that read, mandatory, bring manners. Meanwhile, every temple on Earth starts receiving odd little signs. Statues of Hera begin to weep olive oil when offerings aren't made with proper posture. Oracles deliver divine messages like, maybe try not interrupting the priest next time. One farmer in Thessaly claims his mule started quoting etiquette manuals at him. Historians still argue whether that was divine punishment or just a really strange mule. Olympus descends into paranoid politeness. For one terrifying week, no one dares raise their voice. Aphrodite even says, excuse me, when she bumps into a cloud. You catch Ares trying to high-five Hades in slow motion to reduce thunderclap noise, but it doesn't last. Because the gossip won't stop, the Muses release a 10-verse poem about the Apple incident. There's a Pantheon-wide scroll meme going around. Hera's house rules. With illustrations, Zeus finds a fresco of the event drawn on the ceiling of a mortal bathhouse and pretends not to recognize anyone in it. And worst of all, Eris releases a line of scented chaos candles titled Golden Apple Spice. Each one gives off a slightly different version of events, depending on your mood. You try to console Hera by suggesting she issue a royal statement, maybe a decree about the importance of communication. She stares at you like you just suggested letting mortals run the economy. No, she says slowly. We're past statements. This isn't a public relations problem. It's a behavioral epidemic. And that's when she does it. She draws her sword, not a war blade, but a ceremonial writing dagger, and begins carving something into the air. Letters form, golden and slow and glowing. An oath. Maybe a promise. The first lines of a rule book. You feel it in your bones before she even speaks. All divine beings shall henceforth conduct themselves with grace, temperance, and measurable courtesy in all social gatherings, formal banquets, and passive-aggressive reunions. You blink. This is a draft. Hera says, already scribbling again. The start of a system, a structure. Politeness will no longer be optional. It will be oathed. She looks up at you, wild-eyed, and every single immortal, demigod, nymph, and war-hungry chaos goblin will sign it. You're about to ask how exactly she plans to enforce this when a thunderclap splits the sky. Not from Zeus this time. It's Hera herself. A storm of marble paper whips into existence, each scroll labeled with a god's name and a blank line that simply reads, I solemnly swear not to ruin dinner. By the time the second week rolls around, you've become Hera's unofficial intern. Your tasks include alphabetizing divine names, calming down agitated scrolls that refuse to be signed, and most importantly, helping design the world's first celestial complaint box. It's not a box. Of course, That would be too mortal. This is a complaint urn, hand-carved from enchanted marble, with gold filigree handles and a soundproof interior. It hums slightly when approached, as though bracing for impact. Hera insists it's necessary. We need to know what bothers them, she says, pouring ambrosia into her teacup like it's black coffee. The rudeness won't stop unless we track the patterns. Think of it like social archaeology. You nod, though honestly, it feels more like inviting chaos with formal stationery. The urn is placed in the atrium of Hera's temple, beneath a glowing sign that reads, "Be honest, be polite, and absolutely no hexes." On day 1, the urn fills halfway. Day 2, it overflows. Turns out, gods love complaining more than they love ambrosia. You fish out scroll after scroll, each sealed with wax and ego. Some of the more memorable entries. Hermes keeps stealing my sandals and replacing them with ones that whisper at me. Dionysus referred to my chariot as extra. Artemis rolled her eyes when I blessed a goat. I saw it. Eris mocked my battle cry. I am a valid storm spirit. You sort them into piles. Footwear, tone of voice, food incidents, unkind nicknames, misinterpreted thunder signals. Hera reads every single one. Face set like sculpted granite. But the complaints aren't all ridiculous. Some gods are genuinely distressed. One minor deity writes about feeling excluded because she prefers silence to fanfare. Another nymph says no one listens unless she speaks in dramatic metaphors. Even Zeus sneaks in an unsigned scroll, confessing he feels unseen during group rituals. See, Hera says, it's not just etiquette. It's emotional diplomacy. You nod solemnly while hiding the note someone submitted written entirely in glitter. Historians still argue whether the complaint urn was a divine innovation or just a glorified suggestion box. But it did start something new. For the first time, gods were listening to each other even if they still occasionally threw a thunderbolt or two for punctuation. To maintain structure, Hera sets up official complaint hours twice a week. Post-mead, she installs a nymph as moderator. Her name is Thissa. She has a very soothing voice and gives everyone scented tissues. During these sessions, the urn opens with a melodic yawn. Scrolls float up like a jellyfish, and the room dims to calm lighting mode. One by one, the complaints are read aloud. You'd think the gods would be too proud, but no, they love it. Apollo keeps score. Athena volunteers counter-arguments. Dionysus sets up a complaint bingo sheet for the more trivial grievances. Even Hades stops by once to submit a formal complaint about surface-level favoritism signed with a tiny doodle of Cerberus. The complaint urn becomes the hottest ticket on Olympus. But with it comes tension. Hera notices that certain gods only submit complaints and never take responsibility. Politeness is a two-way street, she mutters, watching Poseidon pretend to be confused about etiquette regarding waves splashing near appetizers. You're tasked with a new project, the Mirror Scroll. It's a feedback system. Each god now receives a reflection of their own behavior, based on how others describe them, not as punishment, but as inspiration. Hermes receives a scroll that says, talks fast, steals faster, charming, but exhausting. He frames it. Athena gets one reading. Smarter than everyone and knows it. Needs a hobby. She starts baking. Ares, predictably, storms into the atrium and tries to punch his... It punches back. Hera insists it's working. You're less sure. One day, you open the urn to find a scroll that just says, everyone's pretending to be nice now. It's boring. You hold it up to Hera. See, she sighs. We're not just fixing rudeness. We're fighting culture. Still, the urn remains. The scrolls keep coming. Some are thoughtful. Some are snide. One is definitely just a drawing of Zeus's new beard with the word "why" scrawled next to it. You can't help but laugh, because even as Olympus struggles through this awkward growth phase, one truth is becoming clear. Being polite isn't natural for immortals, but it might just be necessary. You'd think things would improve with all the venting and feedback. Right, but no. Hera, now fully in her CEO of divine etiquette phase, decides what the gods really need is bonding, not just scrolls, not just complaints, experience. A shift in culture, not just consequences. And so, she arranges the first ever Olympian team-building retreat. You groan the second the cloud carriage invitation hits your hands. It's gilded, perfumed with cedar, and something vaguely judgmental. And it reads, "A trust-centered getaway for Olympians, seeking inner harmony and external decency. Also, attendance mandatory. No shape-shifting to avoid. You arrive at a peaceful mountaintop villa, technically still in heaven, but close enough to mortal air that you have to wear a windproof cloak. The place smells like pine and passive resistance. Your fellow attendees include a grumbling Poseidon already soaking the floor, a twitchy Artemis clearly regretting leaving her wolves behind, Dionysus trying to smuggle in forbidden snacks, and Ares, who has brought 6 spears just in case. The first activity, trust falls. You stand in a circle. Apollo refuses to catch Hermes. Hermes refuses to fall unless everyone signs a liability waiver. Zeus claims falling backward is against his brand. You watch as Hades simply lets his partner fall, claiming trust is a mortal concept. Hera breathes deeply through her teeth. We're going to keep going until someone says something nice without irony. A silence falls over the group. Then Dionysus mutters, "Your hair looks less like judgment today." Progress, sort of. The retreat continues with classic group therapy disasters. One moment you're participating in a blindfolded maze. Use your words. Aris. The next, you're gathered around a bonfire where everyone's supposed to share feelings. Poseidon confesses. He's tired of being called moody. Aphrodite admits she feels objectified during every love poem recital. Athena says nothing, but her owl rolls its eyes a full 180 degrees. And then it happens. The incident. After dinner, Zeus suggests a light-hearted improv game. Each god is assigned a random mortal occupation, just for laughs. He says, "You're not sure what the actual rules are." But before long, Eros is a barista yelling about espresso foam. Artemis is pretending to be a disappointed mom. And Dionysus is doing stand-up comedy as a goat therapist. And then Eris shows up again. No invitation, no explanation. Just suddenly there, wearing a sweater that says Team Chaos. No regrets. She picks up the sacred marshmallow staff, don't ask, taps it twice on the ground, and yells, "Let's do the opposite compliment challenge." What follows is 10 minutes of sarcastic praise so brutal, even Zeus blushes. You think Hermes might cry. One nymph leaves to become a waterfall out of sheer emotional overwhelm. Eris cackles. See, honesty is polite. And then she's gone again, leaving behind a small crater and a single cupcake that whispers insults. You help Hera sweep up. She says nothing, but her sigh has the weight of 12 plagues. Later, under the stars, you sit with her beside the sacred tea urn. I thought this would bring them together. She whispers. It kind of did. You say, they're united in their failure. She smiles weakly. It's something. Mainstream scholars say that this retreat was a turning point for intergod diplomacy. Fringe theorists claim the whole thing was a prank orchestrated by Gaia just to get the gods out of her treehouse for a weekend. What's certain is that something changed. The gods didn't stop being messy, but for the first time, they started noticing the mess. Not just who made it, but how to clean it up. That counts, even if Ares is still trying to stab the trust fall mat. Back on Olympus, the retreat's aftertaste lingers like bad nectar. No one really wants to admit what happened. There's a lot of eye contact avoidance. Ares is still carrying a grudge against the foam machine. Apollo claims his espresso PTSD deserves a statue. But the most troubling fallout, Eris, you can feel her influence trailing behind like a giggling shadow. And Hera, she's spiraling. Not with fury this time, it's something scarier. Determination. This can't happen again, she says as she summons you into her scroll room. It's dark. It smells like wax and lavender, and the kind of resolve that usually ends in a curse. Hera is holding a long parchment, and her quill is glowing ominously. We need standards, she says, but we also need an example. You already know what's coming. You try to pretend you don't. She continues, we need to document, formally and thoroughly, the worst guest in Olympian history. You nod, Eris. Exactly. So begins the archive of inhospitable conduct. a master list of everything Eris has ever done to ruin a party, ceremony, funeral, or soft cheese tasting. Some entries are simple. Brought snakes to a toddler's birthday, replaced wedding wine with potion of confusion, offered toasts that started with, "You're not even that immortal." Others are more creative. One scroll describes how she once taught parrots to mimic Hera's angry muttering, then released them into a temple mid-sermon. Another details the time she disguised herself as a welcome mat and tripped 12 guests during a solar eclipse feast. But the crown jewel, the infamous apple incident. You're instructed to recreate the scene down to the table placements and the salad dressings. You get a measuring stick, a loaf of replica ambrosia bread, and way too much free time. It's kind of beautiful. Honestly, by the end, you and Hera have an official dossier. Case study 0001, the Eris effect. Historians still debate whether this archive was meant to be educational or just therapeutic, but you can see it working. Hera starts smiling again, planning. Because now that she's documented how things fall apart, she's ready to build something that might just hold together. Enter the Politeness Manifesto. You watch her pace around the temple, dictating new laws with divine clarity. Thou shalt not interrupt during speeches unless a natural disaster is imminent. All guests must RSVP. And no, "I am the wind" is not a valid excuse. Thou shalt not speak ill of the dip. She sends drafts to Athena for logical refinement. Aphrodite adds sparkle-infused seals. Hestia designs a warm, welcoming font. Ares adds a clause that allows mild insults, only if paired with a compliment and light snacks. And finally, the most controversial rule. Passive aggression will be treated as full aggression. This breaks Hermes. You find him whispering to a mirror, trying to rephrase a comment about Zeus's toga length into something legally acceptable. Meanwhile, the rest of Olympus braces, because this isn't just etiquette anymore. It's law. You help deliver the first batch of scrolls to the divine halls. Each is rolled in sacred ribbon and sings its preamble if shaken too hard. Reactions vary. Apollo calls it emotional surveillance. Dionysus asks if being delightfully chaotic counts as impolite. Zeus pretends to snore, then accidentally signs it with lightning. But Hera is unmoved. The age of polite divine society has begun, she declares. Mainstream scholars consider this moment the dawn of mythological diplomacy. Fringe theorists argue Hera was trying to turn Olympus into a spa. All you know is that the next invitation to a feast comes with assigned seats, color-coded conversation zones, and a fruit tray labeled emotionally neutral. Still, you notice something weird. The feasts are quieter, less thunder, fewer curses. People listen. No one throws figs. You ask Hera if she's happy. Not yet, she says, but I've seen worse. You nod. After all, you were there when the worst guest in history made her grand entrance and accidentally sparked the Age of Oaths. Once the Politeness Manifesto is out, things change fast. At first, the gods laugh, quietly, nervously, like people do when someone starts passing out rulebooks at karaoke night. Then they realize it's serious. The kind of serious that comes with glowing signature lines and magical consequences. And that's when it hits them. Hera isn't asking. She's installing this. The manifesto has 243 clauses. Some are clear and reasonable. All interruptions must be followed by a compliment and a fruit offering. No belching during sacred hymns unless it's melodic. Respect personal space bubbles, especially those shaped by divine auras. Other clauses, less so. If attending a feast, you must attempt eye contact with at least 3 gods and 1 minor spirit. It is forbidden to whisper secrets directly into the wine. Do not challenge utensils to duels. You're assigned to assist with the rollout. Your job. Training sessions. You walk into the first one with a scroll, a pointer stick, and a stack of nameplates. You walk out 30 minutes later after being booed by Apollo for suggesting that toga tucking is not, in fact, a form of nonverbal shade. Resistance builds fast. It starts with whispers. Since when do I need permission to glare? Are we really banning dramatic sighs? Does anyone else feel emotionally regulated to death? By day 3, it's open rebellion. The fork uprising begins in the banquet hall. Eris is leading the charge. Of course, he is. He bursts in wearing a crown made of dessert spoons and a breastplate forged from teacups. "I will not be silenced," he bellows. By salad etiquette. Behind him, Apollo with a poetry scroll of protest verses, Dionysus riding a barrel like it's a parade float, and a handful of satyrs chanting something off-key about freedom to burp. Their demands are unclear, mostly decorative, but the pitchforks are real. One trident is wearing a tie. You duck under a flying breadstick. A statue of Hera topples. For a moment, it feels like Olympus might shatter. And then Hera enters. She doesn't yell. She doesn't wave lightning. She just walks, slow, calm, regal. The room freezes. She stops next to Ares, who is now balancing a teacup on his head for some reason. "You're upset," she says. He grunts. "You don't want to follow the manifesto." He grunts again. The teacup wobbles. "I understand. That's why." She pulls out a smaller scroll. "We've added the politeness variance clause. You may opt out of certain rules. If you agree to attend charm school," the room gasps. Somewhere, a lyre falls over. "What's charm school?" Ares demands. "You'll see," Hera says sweetly. And so the rebellion ends not with a thunderbolt, but with a sign-up sheet. Fringe scholars still argue whether the Fork Uprising was real or symbolic, a desperate attempt to retain divine sass under bureaucratic rule. Mainstream historians just call it Tuesday. You help sweep the floors, pick up forks, console a traumatized fig. Later, you find Hera alone in her chamber, sipping starlight tea. "They'll fight it," you say. "Of course," she replies. "That's why I made the rules bendy, so they'll lean into them without noticing." You blink. "Wait, you want them to complain?" She smiles. "I want them to try." Because Hera knows something the others don't. You can't force kindness, but you can make it easier to choose. And the manifesto, it's not a law, it's a mirror. Charm School opens the next morning with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for lunar eclipses and dramatic prophecies. There's a banner that reads, "Speak sweetly or else," in a soft cursive that somehow feels threatening. There are velvet chairs, harp music, and an actual welcome mat that hums polite reminders if you forget to wipe your feet. And at the front of it all, Ares. You have never seen the god of war look this uncomfortable. He's been placed in the center seat, flanked by two nymphs holding notebooks and an eager-looking satyr with a bow tie. He glares at you as you enter. "I was tricked," he mutters. "You signed up?" You point out, "I signed something under duress. I thought it was a menu." His first assignment, genuine compliments. Out loud, in front of an audience, you try not to laugh as he clears his throat and squints at Artemis. Your eyes resemble the less offensive parts of a thunderstorm. The room pauses. One nymph claps once. Someone coughs. "Progress," sings the satyr, writing it down like it's a revelation. Charm School continues with other classics. Listening without interruption. Hermes fails immediately, using I statements. "I feel like stabbing you does not count." Reading the room. Poseidon says he can read tides, not emotions. There are mixed results. Aphrodite tries her hand at constructive feedback and ends up launching a 3-hour fashion critique that reduces two nymphs to puddles of shame. Dionysus keeps bringing wine to loosen up the vibe. One class ends in a slap fight overtone, but slowly, so slowly, something shifts. Ares learns how to say, "That upset me." Instead of flipping a table, Apollo gives a toast that doesn't include any backhanded references. Hermes writes a thank you note that doesn't insult the paper quality. Hera observes each session from a distance, hidden behind an enchanted mirror. You catch her smiling once just briefly as Ares offers to pass a fruit tray without threatening anyone. Mainstream historians refer to this period as the etiquette renaissance. Fringe thinkers prefer the term emotional hostage era. But either way, the effects ripple out. In mortal temples, new festivals spring up, Say Hi Sundays, where worshippers greet each other politely in Hera's honor. Olive Branch Week, where arguments are paused in favor of symbolic snacks. Even some oracles begin adding disclaimers to prophecies. This doom shall come to pass. Respectfully, not everyone's on board. Hades refuses to participate in group exercises and begins writing satirical haikus about politeness. Zeus claims he's naturally charming and doesn't need training. His charm class is canceled after one session due to excessive storytelling. But the funniest resistance comes from Hermes. He starts a secret club, the sarcasm underground where gods meet in caves to practice eye-rolling and exaggerated bows. You sneak in once. It's mostly bad puns and coded sighs. They serve ironic lemonade. Eventually, the curriculum expands. Charm School introduces politeness duels, where two participants must out-nice each other using only metaphors and tea-serving techniques. Ares wins, won by calling Dionysus an emotional tapestry stitched from the finest chaos. Even Hera is impressed. But perhaps the most shocking moment, one day, Ares finishes class, walks over to you, and says, "Thank you for not quitting. I'd have burned this place down by now." You don't respond right away. You're too stunned. Not just by the words, but by the fact that he means them. Charm School was never about making gods perfect. It was about giving them tools, and, unexpectedly, some of them have started using those tools for something other than self-defense. You look around the hall. For once, no one is yelling. No one's throwing bread. The harp is playing itself in a major key. Even the welcome mat seems less tense. You exhale. Maybe, just maybe, politeness is beginning to take root. Or at the very least, it's putting up a polite fight. By now, you thought you'd seen it all: trust falls, scroll fights, sarcasm clubs, but nothing quite prepares you for Poseidon's speech therapy sessions. It starts with a whisper. Literally, Hera invites you to a quiet pool behind the Temple of Rain Politeness, a newly consecrated annex no one dares mock aloud. There, she reveals her latest reform project, Poseidon's voice. He only has one setting, she explains, and it's angry wave. You nod. You've heard him greet a newborn nymph like he was commanding a sea battle, and you've seen picnic tables flip purely from his conversational tone. So Hera sets up a simple program. Poseidon must learn how to modulate his voice without summoning whirlpools, breaking conch shells, or terrifying dolphins. The teacher, a retired water nymph named Claria. She wears sea glass earrings and always smells like eucalyptus in firm boundaries. She speaks at a constant 3-5 volume, like a bedtime story that never ends. Poseidon hates her. "I am the sea," he yells during the first session. "And I am your tone coach," she replies, calmly placing a kelp lozenge into his palm. Claria introduces him to seaweed gargling. It's supposed to smooth his vocal cords. Poseidon swallows half of it by accident and sulks for an hour. Then comes splash diction, a technique involving whispering vowels into water without creating ripples. He fails, loudly, but progress comes in strange ways. One day, he manages to ask for salt without shaking the entire coastline. Claria claps, he scowls, then pretends not to enjoy the praise. Later, you catch him rehearsing polite greetings to a coral reef. "Good evening, barnacle. You look hydrated." Fringe historians believe this era marked the beginning of Poseidon's mild phase, a brief window in which seafarers reported less storm rage and more grumpy mist. Others say it's a myth, but there are surviving mortal songs about the whispering wave dated to that year. The real turning point, however, comes during a group speech exercise. Claria lines up a dozen divine students, each required to greet another using a non-threatening tone. Poseidon approaches Hermes, clears his throat, concentrates. "Hey," he says, voice like a tide at low moon. "I like your sandals." Hermes is stunned. He actually drops his scroll. "Thanks," he squeaks. They whisper affirmations now. Claria beams. Poseidon storms off, but with less splash than usual. Back in Hera's temple, you report the progress. He's learning. You say, he's adapting. She corrects. And she's right. Poseidon doesn't love etiquette. He doesn't even believe in it. But he understands now that being heard isn't just about volume, it's about presence. About choosing words like you'd choose a tide, with purpose, timing, and a hint of restraint. That week, sea foam in mortal harbors starts forming into polite phrases like "excuse me" and "after you." A ship's bell rings twice, and the echo says, "Please." Coincidence? You doubt it. There's one final test. Poseidon is invited to speak at the Great Nymph Assembly, a diplomatic summit usually avoided by everyone with thunder-based reputations. The theme this year, moisture and manners. You help write his speech. He rewrites it in sea ink, then forgets it. He stands before a crowd of nymphs, minor river gods, and two judgmental turtles. He opens his mouth and doesn't shout. "Thank you," he says, "for letting me speak." There's a beat of stunned silence. A nymph drops her clipboard. One of the turtles faints, and then applause. Poseidon doesn't smile. Not exactly, but he nods. He steps down, and as he leaves, the tide follows him, not crashing, but whispering, soft and rhythmic, like the beginnings of something new. Back in the temple, Hera raises an eyebrow. "You taught him manners." You shrug. "I taught him volume control." The manners might be accidental. Still, you feel it in the air, softer now, less sharp. Like even the ocean's learning to listen. By now, the gods are quieter, but that doesn't mean they're calm. In fact, the more they try to behave, the more they start to notice how badly everyone else behaves. And nowhere is that tension clearer than in the woods, specifically at the nymph civil debates. It begins with a scroll you find pinned to a tree in the forest of Thessalia. Inked in perfect spirals and lightly scented with moss, it reads, "To all dryads, naiads, oreads, and other sylvan entities, you are formally invited to the First Congress of Civil Decency. Topics include leaf-rustling noise ordinances, splash zone etiquette, and whether frogs can be considered emotional support." You stare at the scroll for a long time. Then, you make the terrible decision to attend. The gathering is held in a glade so perfectly green it looks like it was painted by someone with an overdeveloped sense of tranquility. Birds chirp on cue. A breeze twirls through with dramatic timing. And dozens of nymphs arrive, shimmering with floral perfume and old grudges. You sit near the back, behind a myrtle bush. The moderator is a river nymph named Clea, wearing a sash that says, "Civility is strength" in cursive seaweed. She opens with a polite cough. "Our first motion," she announces, "concerns rustling." A dryad named Thallo stands. "We request that all tree spirits keep their leaf rustling below 3 decibels after twilight, unless it is due to wind-based emergencies or poetic sighing." Immediate uproar. An oak dryad yells, "You try living next to squirrels without rustling." A younger sapling nymph murmurs, "What's a decibel?" Someone throws a fern. Clea calmly bangs a gavel made from a hollow reed. "Order, please." And no sap spitting this time. The debate continues. Next, moisture etiquette. River nymphs complain about dryads shaking water from their bark onto communal seating stones. Dryads argue that river nymphs leave puddles on purpose. A bog sprite demands seating made from sponge moss. You sneak a glance at your notes, which now read, "Too much rustling." Rude. Splashing itzels may be personal. Frogs, ills divided opinions. It sounds ridiculous. But then again, so did seaweed speech therapy. One by one, nymphs step forward and speak their truths. Their voices are high and watery or low and creaky, depending on their habitat. But the content is always the same. I want to be heard without being drowned out. I want space without isolation. I want to coexist, but not silently. Historians still argue whether the civil debates were legally binding or just emotional improv with plants. But the outcome is clear. They reach consensus. Sort of. The final agreement reads, "Let there be kindness in the canopy and courtesy in the currents. And if we must sigh dramatically, let it be in unison." A compromise. Back on Olympus, Hera receives the minutes of the meeting on a scroll stitched into a vine. She reads it twice, then passes it to you. "It's working," she says quietly. "Even the ones who speak in rustles and ripples, they're learning how to shape it." You nod. Because something strange is happening in the forests. Trees no longer groan at night, they murmur. Streams burble greetings. Moss grows with better table manners. Even the frogs croak with better timing. You visit the glade again weeks later. There's a new sign. "Welcome. Rustle softly. Splash with consent." You smile. The gods invented manners out of desperation. But the nymphs, they're turning them into an art. You wake one morning to the sound of trumpets. Not the usual heavenly kind that signal war or weddings or Zeus's latest snack craving, but soft, ceremonial ones. They're announcing something bigger. You step outside to see a sky streaked with lavender banners. Doves circle overhead, holding tiny scrolls in their beaks, each bearing the same message. Today, the Great Politeness Oath Ceremony. Attendance is not optional. Refreshments will be respectful. You take a breath. It's happening. The event is held in the Valley of Harmony, a place specifically enchanted to discourage sarcasm and echo only gentle applause. The air smells like warm bread and blossoming myrtle. The chairs are made of ethically sourced clouds. Even the thunder has been muffled for the occasion. You spot Hera in the center, wearing robes so formally regal they actually shush when she walks. She looks tired, determined, radiant, and deeply done with everyone's nonsense. One by one, the gods arrive. Athena, armed with a binder of annotated notes. Apollo, trying to freestyle a hymn about mutual respect. Hestia, who brings snacks and calming eye contact. Even Ares shows up, muttering, "Let's get this over with," while smoothing his tunic and wiping olive oil off his ceremonial sword. Hermes arrives late on purpose, probably, and immediately tries to swap the nameplates to make Zeus sit next to the goddess of seasonal judging. Hera doesn't blink. Touch them and you'll spend a century meditating on eye contact. Hermes sits down. A golden podium rises from the ground. Hera steps forward. Her voice is clear, slow, unshakable. Today, we vow before each other, before Olympus, and yes, even before the mortals who light candles in our name, to conduct ourselves with courtesy. You feel it ripple out like gentle thunder. The gravity of it. She continues, to speak with care, to listen without interruption, to avoid weaponizing compliments, forks, or scrolls, to greet without glares, to pause before punishing, to extend peace before judgment, to leave figs on the table. There's a silence so deep you hear a leaf sigh. Then, the scrolls arrive, hundreds of them floating, glowing, softly humming like lullabies made of parchment. Each god receives one, personalized, embossed, and faintly warm to the touch. You're assigned to assist the signings. It's chaos disguised as ritual. Poseidon tries to sign with seawater. Apollo signs his with a sunbeam that scorches the edges. Ares uses blood technically his own, but still dramatic. Dionysus signs in wine and immediately drinks it off. You hand Hermes a backup scroll. Don't enchant this one. He smirks. No promises. Zeus, naturally, refuses to follow protocol. He conjures a pen shaped like a thunderbolt and scrawls his name diagonally across 3 different lines while humming the intro to his own fanfare. Still, he signs, one by one. They all do, even Eris. Yes, Eris. She shows up in a cloak made of ironic applause and says, "I'm only here because I heard there would be snacks." Then she signs the scroll and writes a smiley face under it. Hera glares. "I'm being polite," Eris says with mock offense. "I even RSVP'd." Later, a goat eats her scroll. No one investigates. When it's done, the valley shimmers. You feel something settle, not peace. Exactly. But intention, the kind that lingers like soft music after the curtain falls. Mainstream historians call this the turning point of tone. Fringe believers insist the ceremony altered the sound of thunder for 6 months softer, rounder, like a rolling hush. You just remember the way Hera looked when it ended, not triumphant, just relieved, like she'd finally handed off a heavy, invisible weight and was daring Olympus to carry it with her. You ask her how she feels. Hopeful, she says, then pauses, cautiously, because gods don't become kind overnight. But tonight they vowed to try. You'd think, after all that, things might quiet down, that the oaths would settle like dew on Mount Olympus, giving everything a soft, civil glow. But you forget one crucial truth. Mortals are always watching, and they are not great at subtlety. Word of the Politeness oath ceremony spreads faster than Dionysus at an open bar. Temple priests start reporting dreams of Hera holding up a spoon and saying, "Be nice or be a statue." Children reenact trust falls during festival games. One local sculptor begins crafting oath figurines, tiny, dignified models of gods holding fruit trays and smiling through passive discomfort. At first, it's charming. Mortals start greeting each other with polite nods and phrases like "May your olives never roll." Marketplace disputes get resolved via compliment duels. A farmer from Crete writes a song titled "Mind Your Toga" that becomes annoyingly popular among youth. But then, it escalates. Some mortals begin taking things very literally. A village in Boyosha forms a politeness cult where every meal must begin with 7 bowing rituals and end with an offering of their most emotionally neutral goats. Another town starts worshipping furniture, believing that being rude to chairs might offend household spirits. You're summoned to investigate when a group of devotees in Corinth begins leaving baskets of figs beside particularly well-spoken rocks. I think they believe the rocks are divine monitors. You tell Hera, she sighs. I said oaths, not obedience to inanimate objects. Things get worse when a mortal playwright stages a drama titled The Whisper of Civility, featuring a character named Politeness, who smites anyone who interrupts monologues. The audience cries. A new temple is built. Mortals begin lighting incense before arguing. Meanwhile, a group of scholars starts debating whether dreams of polite behavior should count as divine visitations. One priest claims his ox bowed to him after prayer. Another swears her goat mumbled, "Please." Hera isn't sure whether to be flattered or horrified. We try to set an example. You say, "They made it a brand," she mutters. You try to explain mortal logic. If one god signs an oath, it's a nice moment. If all the gods do, it's a movement. And if mortals don't fully understand it well, they fill in the gaps with rituals involving linen and wild assumptions. Fringe historians call this the politeness golden age. Mainstream thinkers call it the great misunderstanding. One very grumpy goat just calls it spa. To clarify things, Hera sends gentle corrections through oracles. Unfortunately, oracles tend to speak in riddles. One famously declares, "The polite shall rise, but those who bow too often shall be stepped on." This is later misinterpreted as a prophecy about snakes. You return to Olympus feeling exhausted. Mortals have built entire social hierarchies based on table posture. Someone tried to canonize a napkin. And the newest trend? Sacrificial apologies. You do not ask what they're sacrificing. You find Hera in her garden, clipping roses that hum lullabies. She looks up at you, then gestures silently to the bench beside her. You sit. They meant well. You say, "I know." She sighs again, not angry. Just the sigh of a god who knows that humans, once inspired, are impossible to put back in the box. Then she laughs, just once. A short, tired sound. At least they're not throwing olives anymore. You're halfway through organizing scroll inventory when a frantic knock echoes through the marble hallway. Sharp, rhythmic, and very viney. You open the temple door to find a satyr named Kalos, eyes wide, shirtless, and clearly out of breath. "We have a situation in the vineyard," he gasps. "A loophole situation." You sigh. Of course you do. Turns out, the satyrs who had been suspiciously quiet throughout the entire politeness revolution have found a way around it. Not by breaking the rules. No, that would be too simple. They found a loophole. Specifically, excessive flattery does not count as impoliteness, provided it lacks direct malice. Clause 89. 2b. You ride a cloud chariot down to the southern slopes where grapevines curl like lazy dragons. The vineyard is booming, but not with wine. It's booming with sweet-talking nonsense. You walk into a scene straight out of a confusing dream. Satyrs lounging on barrels, strumming lyres, tossing compliments like confetti at nymphs. Passers-by. Grapes. Even the goats are blushing. "My lady," one croons to a willow tree, "your bark is sublime. Would that I could press my cheek to your photosynthetic grace forever." Someone applauds. Another satyr compliments your sandals for exactly 6 minutes. You don't even have sandals. Hera arrives shortly after, wind-chilled and visibly unamused. She listens as a satyr named Lamos serenades her eyebrows. They arc like moonlit bridges over lakes of eternal judgment. He purrs, sharp, yet merciful. There is a pause in the universe. "I should turn you into a decorative pot," Hera says flatly. "But would the pot be as beautifully assertive as your presence?" He counters, and just like that, you witness it. Weaponized politeness, a full-blown flattery loophole crisis. The satyrs are gaming the system. Technically polite, technically sincere, but emotionally exhausting. It gets worse. Soon, satyrs are charging for compliments. 5 drachma to be told you have emotionally responsible posture. 10 if you want it sung. A group of mortal merchants files a divine grievance. we can't sell anything. One of them complains. Customers get distracted mid-transaction by sonnets about their earlobes. You bring the issue to Hera. She rubs her temples. I wanted them to speak kindly, not seduce every leaf with a vowel. So, she drafts Addendum 44E, flattery threshold limits. Compliments must be relevant to the situation, not repeated more than twice per interaction, not directed at objects incapable of emotional consent, e.g., furniture. Wind must be followed by at least one act of nonverbal support. This final clause confuses everyone for 2 weeks, until Hermes explains it means you can't say nice hair and then vanish forever. You gotta, like, hold a door open or carry a scroll. Still, not everyone is happy. One nymph protests that flattery is her love language. A satyr cries during a moderation session. Someone tries to compliment Hera's enforcement policies and gets vaporized halfway through the sentence. But eventually, it cools down. The vineyard quiets. The goats stop blushing. Satyrs start singing about wine again, instead of tree bark and toes. Fringe thinkers still consider this loophole era the golden age of glorious gibberish. Others refer to it as that 1 month where everyone sounded like they were trying to date a fruit bowl. You return to Olympus worn out from praise. You okay? Hera asks. I was compared to a heroic onion, you murmur. She doesn't laugh. She just offers you tea made from empathy leaves. You've earned it, she says. And for once, no one compliments the cup. It's been months since the oath ceremony, and Hera's reforms against all odds are holding. Fewer scrolls explode. Apologies happen voluntarily. No one's thrown a fig in weeks, and yet, something's off. It starts small. A sly glance here, a perfectly timed pause there. The gods haven't gone back to chaos, but you can feel the return of something subtler. Sarcasm. Not loud, not crass, just sharp. You spot it first during a lunar brunch. Athena compliments Artemis's moon phase control with a tone so dry it could absorb humidity. Ares pretends to be impressed by Dionysus's restraint, while gulping down a mead waterfall. Even Hermes asks, "Oh, are we still doing politeness?" Like he's wondering if toga sleeves are still trendy. You report it to Hera. She's already aware. I thought this might happen, she admits. Once true chaos fades, the next threat is tone. So, she calls an emergency session. The gods gather under a new banner, Politeness. Phase 2, Sincerity and Tone Management. The scrolls are shorter this time. The mood, skeptical, let's be honest. Apollo says, twirling his quill, isn't a little sarcasm just healthy emotional distance? Zeus chimes in, I thought sarcasm was just how mortals say they care. And someone probably Eris shouts, at least sarcasm is honest. Unlike ambrosia compliments, the room simmers, and that's when Hera drops the bomb. We are implementing a soft ban on sarcasm. The reaction is instant. Ares throws his chair. Hermes spontaneously combusts into a glittery shrug. Even Hestia gasps. Hestia, you duck under the table? Hera explains, not a full ban, a soft ban. We're introducing a tone audit. All comments must pass the new intent filter. She hands you the prototype. It's a shimmering disc that hovers beside a speaker and glows either blue sincere or red biting. Hermes calls it the mood ring of doom. Testing begins that afternoon. Poseidon fails immediately. Lovely weather, he grumbles, and the disc lights up like an emergency beacon. Dionysus's toast to the incredibly competent council that definitely didn't overcomplicate water etiquette sets the disc on fire. You take notes while Hera watches with steepled fingers. There's too much pride in hidden barbs, she says. We need pride in openness. Easier said than done. The gods struggle. Apollo writes haikus that read like personal attacks. Ares offers what he calls compli-solts. Even Athena's constructive feedback comes out like riddles with built-in judgment, so Hera tries a new tactic. Radical directness workshops. You don't even get halfway through the title before the eye-rolling begins. But once again, change creeps in sideways. Apollo starts saying what he actually means, and discovers he's not nearly as annoyed as he thought. Ares admits His sarcasm was masking actual compliments. Even Hermes breaks down and confesses, "I don't hate the manifesto. I just don't know how to ask people to pass the nectar." Hera listens, softens, adjusts. She doesn't remove sarcasm entirely. She simply reframes it. Use wit to build, not to wound. It's not catchy. It's not divine poetry, but it sticks. Fringe theorists argue this period marked the death of the Olympian punchline. Traditional scholars say it created the first divine code of emotional labor. One mortal playwright calls it the age of awkward but honest gods. You just call it progress, because by the end of the week, something has shifted again. The air feels less tense. Laughter starts sounding real. Compliments come slower but steadier. The mood ring of doom dims to a gentle flicker, and somewhere deep in the halls of Olympus, a goat bleats sarcastically. Just once. Quietly, as if to say, "Nice tone control, everybody." It's the morning after what scholars now refer to as the Tone Wars. You're halfway through your breakfast fig when Hera summons you with 2 words, "Final draft." You find her at her desk, surrounded by mountains of old scrolls, politeness clause revisions, charm school attendance ledgers, heiress fan mail unopened. It smells like ink and resolve. "We're sealing the oath," she says without looking up. One last edit. One final promise. She gestures to a gold-rimmed scroll beside her. You lean over and read the title, "The Eternal Courtesies, Divine Addendum." The contents are shorter than you expected. Just 3 lines. Let kindness be a choice before it becomes a law. Let sarcasm be a spice, not a sword. Let everyone speak, even the ones who don't like to. Simple, powerful, kind of terrifying. You look at her. That's it. She nods. They don't need more rules. They need reminders. Still, she hesitates. Is it enough? She asks you like a god, suddenly unsure she's done the right thing. You don't answer with words. You hand her a fresh quill. Then you watch her sign her own name. Hera, underneath, in tiny script. I will try to be the example, not the exception. It's done. You help distribute the final scroll. One copy is hung as the Hall of Declarations. One is translated into wind patterns and taught to seagulls. Another is embedded in a rainbow by Iris, who insists even visual metaphors deserve manners. The reactions are mixed. Zeus snorts. Bit sentimental. Athena frowns. No footnotes. Dionysus cries for 10 minutes. And then invents a new cocktail called Civility Sangria. But no one rejects it. Even Eris signs it again, this time without the smiley face, just a small E and a slightly raised eyebrow. You think it's her version of respect? You expect things to return to normal after that, but they don't. Because Olympus is quieter now. Not in a boring way, in a listening way. One afternoon, Ares and Apollo argue about music volume, then pause, breathe, and resolve it over fruit. You nearly drop your ambrosia. Hermes, instead of a prank, leaves Hestia a thank you note in actual ink. It's weird. She frames it, and Poseidon starts greeting mortals with nods instead of tidal waves. Sailors begin to report that storms now whisper, "Sorry." The final change comes from Hera herself. She invites all of Olympus to a final politeness feast. No thrones, no fanfare. Just a long, round table where no one sits higher than anyone else. You watch as everyone arrives, laughs, passes food, compliments each other's jokes sincerely. And then Hera stands. She raises her glass, clears her throat, and says nothing, just smiles. Because sometimes she's learned the most powerful thing you can say is choosing not to say anything at all, just to be polite. You stay behind after the feast. The stars are out bright, steady, unusually well-mannered tonight. The dishes have been cleared, the last scrolls tucked away. Even Hermes left without stealing the table centerpiece. Hera's still there. She's seated at the far end of the now empty table, tracing her fingers along the edge of a wine cup. Not drinking, just thinking. You hesitate before approaching, but she waves you over. You sit beside her, say nothing. Eventually, she speaks. They laughed at the idea of rules for tone, she says. And then they followed them anyway. Sort of, mostly. You offer, sometimes with a harp solo. She chuckles softly. I never thought I'd live to see Ares apologize for interrupting. You glance upward. Well, technically, he said, my bad. Continue your war poetry. Hera smirks. That counts. There's a long pause. Comfortable. You think back on it all. The food fight. The complaint urn. the charm school, the vineyard debacle, even the talking pot who once tried to moderate an argument between two ferns. It was absurd, and it worked. Sort of. You turn to Hera, so now what? She exhales through her nose, tired, but at peace. Now, we let them live with it. Let the oath settle into their bones like mist. No more scrolls, no more new laws, just reminders. When necessary, she gets up slowly, stretches her arms like a mortal woman who has done enough for one lifetime. And then she does something unthinkable. She takes off her crown, sets it on the table, walks out under the stars, barefoot. You don't follow. Instead, you remain in the quiet, the gentle hum of divine memory all around, the faint taste of peace still lingering in the air. A polite world isn't loud. It's soft, patient, sometimes even silly, but it stays, and that's where we leave it. The gods didn't become saints. They didn't erase chaos. They just promised through oaths and awkward banquets and way too many fig metaphors to try. And that's what makes Olympus, finally, feel just a little more human. So now, let the lights fade behind your eyes. Let Olympus drift back into the clouds, where gods sip wine a little more thoughtfully. And even the thunder seems to say, "Excuse me," as it rolls by. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath grow slower, softer, quieter, like the scrolls of old that no longer shout orders, but hum. Old stories in your dreams. Picture Hera, sitting beneath a moon that doesn't need to outshine anything tonight. No speeches, no laws, just a quiet woman in divine robes, smiling to herself because despite everything they listened. A little. Imagine the complaint urn, now sealed, resting gently beside a sleeping harp. No new grievances, just the occasional echo of laughter. And you were there for it all. The soft revolutions, the slightly too long compliments, the awkward apologies that took centuries to form. You helped carry the scrolls, held space for the chaos, listened when even the gods didn't quite know what they were trying to say. And that matters. So let your thoughts soften. Let the echoes drift. You're no longer in Olympus. You're somewhere safer now, where the world is quiet, where kindness isn't perfect but practiced, where sleep finds you like a whispered vow from long ago. I will speak gently. I will hear truly. I will try. Good night, dear listener.